Jane Toppan was born Honora Kelly on March 31, 1854, in Boston, Massachusetts, the daughter of Irish immigrants. Her mother, Bridget Kelly, died of tuberculosis when she was very young. Her father, Peter Kelly, was well known as an eccentric and abusive alcoholic, nicknamed by those who knew him, Kelly the Crack, as in, crackpot. In later years, Kelly was said to have sewn his own eyelids closed while working as a tailor. In 1860, only a few years after his wife's death, Kelly surrendered his two youngest children, 8-year-old Delia Josephine and 6-year-old Honora, to the Boston Female Asylum, an orphanage for indigent female children. He never saw them again. Documents from the asylum note that Delia and Honora were rescued from a very miserable home. No records exist of their experiences during their time in the asylum, but reportedly, Delia became a prostitute while their older sister Nellie, who was not committed to the orphanage, was committed to an insane asylum. In November 1862, less than 2 years after being abandoned by her father, Honora was placed as an indentured servant in the home of Mrs. Anne C. Toppan of Lowell, Massachusetts. Though never formally adopted by the Toppans, Honora took on the surname of her benefactors to distance herself from her former family and eventually became known as Jane Toppan. The original Toppan family already had a daughter, Elizabeth, with whom Honora was on good terms. In 1885, Toppan began training to be a nurse at Cambridge Hospital. Unlike her early years, where she was described as brilliant and terrible, at the hospital she was well liked, bright, and friendly, evoking the nickname, Jolly Jane. Once she became close with the patients, she picked her favorite ones, who were normally elderly and very sick. During her residency, Toppan used her patients as guinea pigs in experiments with morphine and atropine. She altered their prescribed dosages to see what it did to their nervous systems. However, she spent considerable time alone with patients, making up fake charts, medicating them to drift in and out of consciousness, and even getting into bed with them. Toppan was recommended for the prestigious Massachusetts General Hospital in 1889. There, she claimed several more victims before being fired the following year. She briefly returned to Cambridge but was soon dismissed for administering opiates recklessly. Toppan then began a career as a private nurse and flourished despite complaints of petty theft. Toppan began her poisoning spree in earnest in 1895 by killing her landlord, Israel Dunham, and his wife. In 1899 she killed her foster sister Elizabeth with a dose of strychnine. In 1901, Toppan moved in with the elderly Alden Davis and his family in Katome to take care of him after the death of his wife, Mattie, whom Toppan had murdered. Within weeks, she killed Davis, his sister Edna, and 2 of his daughters, Minnie and Genevieve. The surviving members of the Davis family ordered a toxicology exam on Minnie, which determined that she had been poisoned. Local authorities assigned a police detail on Toppan to watch her. On October 29, 1901, she was arrested for murder. By 1902, she had confessed to 31 murders. Soon after the trial, one of William Randolph Hearst's newspapers, the New York Journal, printed what was purported to be Toppan's confession to her lawyer, claiming that she had killed more than 31 people, and that she wanted the jury to find her sane so she could eventually have a chance at being released. Toppan insisted upon her own sanity in court, claiming that she could not be insane if she knew what she was doing and knew that it was wrong, but nonetheless she was declared insane and committed. On June 23, 1902, in the Barnstable County Courthouse, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed for life in the Taunton Insane Hospital. She died there on August 17, 1938, at the age of 84. An article in the Hoosier State Chronicles, published shortly after the arrest, reported that Toppan would fondle her victims as they died and attempt to see the inner workings of their souls through their eyes. Under questioning, she stated she derived a sexual thrill from patients being near death, coming back to life and then dying again. Toppan administered a drug mixture to the patients she chose as her victims, lay with them, and held them close as they died. Toppan is often considered an angel of mercy, a type of serial killer who takes on a caretaker role and attacks the vulnerable and dependent, though she also murdered for seemingly more personal reasons, such as in the case of the Davis family. It is possible Toppan was also motivated by jealousy, in the case of the murder of her foster sister. She later described her motivation as a paralysis of thought and reason, a strong urge to poison. Toppan used poison for more than just murder, reportedly poisoning a housekeeper just enough so that she appeared drunk in order to steal her job and kill the family. She even poisoned herself to evoke the sympathy of men who courted her. Victims Toppan identified a Israel Dunham, patient, died on May 26, 1895, aged 83, Lovely Dunham, patient, died on September 19, 1897, aged 87, Elizabeth Brigham, foster sister, died on August 29, 1899, aged 70, Mary McNear, patient, died on December 28, 1899, aged 70, Florence Calkins, housekeeper for Elizabeth, died on January 15, 1900, aged 45, William Ingraham, patient, died on January 27, 1900, aged 70, Sarah, Myra, Connors, patient and friend, died on February 11, 1900, aged 48, Edna Bannister, sister-in-law of Elizabeth, died on June 19, 1901, aged 77, Mattie Davis, wife of Alden Davis, died on July 4, 1901, aged 62, Genevieve Gordon, Annie, daughter of Alden and Mattie Davis, died on July 30, 1901, Alden Davis, died on August 8, 1901, aged 64, Mary, Minnie, Gibbs, daughter of Alden and Mattie, died on August 13, 1901, aged 40. She was a nurse who used her patients as medical guinea pigs. Jane Toppan started working as a nurse in 1885. She trained at Cambridge Hospital, where she enjoyed testing out medications on her patients, without doctor's orders. She would give them varying amounts of morphine and atropine, a painkiller and a nerve agent, respectively, because she wanted to see the medication's effects on the nervous system. Toppan spent a lot of time in these patients' rooms and would make up fake charts that hid her actual activities. Not all of these patients died immediately. Some would come close to death and then spring back to life once the medication wore off. She laid in bed with her victims and held them as they died. Jane Toppan stopped working for Cambridge Hospital before she officially earned her nursing certificate. 2 patients, mysteriously, died while she was caring for them, and the hospital became suspicious. So, she forged her certificate and began working for private clients, caring for their elderly and sickly relatives. Toppan later admitted that she laid in bed with her patients while she administered the drugs of her choice. She enjoyed holding them as they lay dying. She killed her foster sister with strychnine. Although Jane Toppan wasn't officially adopted by the Toppan family, and technically she joined him as an indentured servant, she still believed the Toppan's daughter, Elizabeth, was her foster sister. Mr. and Mrs. Toppan treated Elizabeth much better than they did Jane, causing Jane to become angry and resentful. She held on to that anger for years, and finally, in the midst of her patient-killing spree, killed Elizabeth with a lethal dose of strychnine. She tried to seduce her dead foster sister's husband. Jane Toppan had a complicated relationship with men. She got engaged shortly after graduating high school, only to be left at the altar. Believing that no man could ever love her, she aspired to become a nurse. She eventually found another suitor, but he threw her out of his house when his family members mysteriously became ill while in her presence. Later on, after she killed her foster sister, Elizabeth Toppan, Jane tried to comfort Elizabeth's grieving husband by trying to get him to be with her. Her attempts at seduction were rebuffed. She moved in with Alden Davis to take care of him, then killed him and his family. In early 1901, Jane Toppan was hired to care for the elderly Alden Davis after his wife had died, unbeknownst to them, at Toppan's hands. She moved into the Davises' house, and began her duties as a nurse. After a matter of months, Alden Davis and 2 of his daughters had died. The remaining family members called for an inquest, thereby discovering that the family had all been poisoned. Toppan was arrested for their murders in October 1901. She wanted to go down in history as having killed the most people. Despite the 31 people she confessed to killing, from her former landlords, her foster sister, Elizabeth Toppan, and numerous patients, she said she wanted to kill more. She claimed her overall goal was to have killed more people. helpless people than any other man or woman who ever lived. She clearly did not meet this goal, although she turned out to be quite a prolific killer who lived on in infamy.